The sun beat down merciless on the wooden platform where Eliza Boone stood in a dress that didn't fit right. It was her mother's wedding dress. Taken in at the waist and let out at the shoulders, the lace yellowed with age and smelling faintly of camphor and disappointment. Eliza could feel the sweat gathering at the small of her back, could feel every eye in the town square burning into her skin. She kept her gaze fixed on the dusty planks beneath her feet. If she looked up, she'd see them, all of them. The women whispering behind gloved hands. The men shifting uncomfortably, already embarrassed on her behalf. The children who'd thrown rocks at her when she was younger, now dressed in their Sunday best and giggling at the spectacle. Thomas Whitmore stood across from her, his face the color of old meat. He wouldn't look at her either. He'd looked at her once, 3 weeks ago, when her father had arranged this marriage over whiskey and a handshake. Thomas had looked at her then with something like resignation, which, at the time, Eliza had mistaken for acceptance. She knew better now. The preacher cleared his throat for the third time. His voice had gone hoarse. "Do you, Thomas Whitmore, take this woman?" "No." The word dropped like a stone into still water. Eliza's head snapped up. Thomas was staring at his boots, his jaw working like he was chewing something tough. "I can't. I won't. I'm sorry, but I can't do this." The square erupted. Women gasped. Men shouted. Eliza stood frozen, her hand still clutching the wilted bouquet of prairie flowers she'd picked herself that morning, because no one had thought to get her real ones. "Thomas!" Her father's voice cut through the noise, sharp as a blade. Marcus Boone pushed through the crowd, his face mottled with rage and something that looked like panic. "We had an agreement." "Keep your land," Thomas said, louder now. "I don't want it. Not like this. Not with—" He gestured vaguely in Eliza's direction without actually looking at her. "I can't." The laughter started then. Low at first, just a few scattered chuckles from the back of the crowd. Then more. Then it spread like fire through dry grass, and Eliza felt something inside her chest crack clean through. She'd known this would happen. Some part of her had always known. At 24, Eliza Boone was past the age when women in frontier towns got married. She was too tall, too angular, her features too sharp and her hands too rough from work. Her hair was the color of field mice, her eyes an indeterminate gray-brown that her mother had once described as muddy. She had a scar through her left eyebrow from when she'd fallen off a horse at 12, and her front teeth were slightly crooked. She'd grown up hearing it. Poor thing. Shame about the Boone girl. Such a sweet nature, if only she'd been born with a sweeter face. The whispers had followed her everywhere. To church socials where she'd sat alone while other girls her age danced. To town gatherings where mothers pulled their sons away like homeliness was catching. To her own house, where her mother looked at her with barely concealed disappointment, and her father treated her like a problem to be solved. And now this. The solution. The arrangement. The last chance. Gone. Sheriff Dutch McKenna climbed onto the platform, his bulk making the boards creak. He held up both hands for quiet, and eventually the laughter died down to scattered snickers and whispers. All right. His voice boomed across the square. "Settle down, folks. We got ourselves a situation here." "Ain't no situation," someone called out. "Boy came to his senses is all." More laughter. Eliza's vision started to blur at the edges. "Marcus Boone came to me 2 days ago," Dutch continued, "offering incentive for this marriage to happen. Said he'd deed over 50 acres of prime grazing land and 20 head of cattle to sweeten the pot." He turned to look at Thomas. "That offer still stand, Marcus?" Eliza's father nodded stiffly, his face like granite. "Then I'm opening it up." Dutch's gaze swept the crowd. "Any man here willing to marry Miss Eliza Boone walks away with land, livestock, and a wife. That's a hell of a deal for a morning's work." The silence that followed was worse than the laughter. Eliza forced herself to look at them, at the men she'd known her whole life. Old Mr. Peterson, who ran the general store. Young Billy Crawford, who'd once asked her to dance at a barn raising when they were both 15 before his mother had pulled him away. James Tucker, newly widowed, with 3 children who needed a mother. One by one, they looked away. "Come on now," Dutch said, his voice taking on a false heartiness. 50 acres of good land. That's enough to build something real on. "Land ain't worth that much trouble," someone muttered, loud enough to be heard. Eliza felt her mother's hand on her arm. "Please," Catherine Boone whispered, "please don't cry. Not here. Not in front of everyone." But Eliza wasn't crying. She was past that. She was somewhere beyond humiliation, in a place that felt cold and distant and almost peaceful. This was it then, the moment she'd been dreading her entire life, the moment when the whole town confirmed what she'd always suspected, that she was worthless, unwanted, less than nothing. 75 acres, her father said suddenly. His voice cracked. And 30 head. The sheriff looked uncomfortable now. Marcus, 100 acres. Everything I got west of the creek. And 50 head of cattle. Best stock in the territory. Jesus, Marcus, someone said. You're giving away your whole ranch. I'm securing my daughter's future, Marcus shot back, but Eliza could hear the desperation underneath. He wasn't securing anything. He was trying to offload a burden, trying to fix his mistake, the mistake of having a daughter who looked like her instead of like some other man's pretty wife. The silence stretched out. Somewhere a horse stamped and snorted. A baby started to cry and was quickly hushed. Going once, Dutch said, but his heart clearly wasn't in it anymore. This had gone from entertainment to something uglier, something that made even the cruelest onlookers shift uncomfortably. Eliza pulled her arm free from her mother's grip. Stop. Eliza, stop it. She looked at her father. Just stop. Please. Marcus Boone's face worked. For a second she thought she saw something like grief there. But then it hardened again. You need a husband. Not like this. Going twice? Dutch said quietly. You'll die alone, her mother hissed. Is that what you want? To be alone forever? Eliza almost laughed. She'd been alone her whole life. What difference would it make? Gone. I will. The voice came from the back of the crowd, deep, quiet. But it carried across the square like it had been meant to. Everyone turned. A man stood at the edge of the platform, one boot up on the bottom step. Eliza had never seen him before. He was tall, taller than most men in town, with dark hair that needed cutting and a face that looked like it had been lived in hard. He wore trail clothes, dusty pants, a worn shirt, a leather vest that had seen better days. There was a gun at his hip, sitting easy like it belonged there. But it was his eyes that made Eliza's breath catch. Dark eyes that looked at her, actually looked at her, not past her or around her or through her, with something she couldn't quite name. Who the hell are you? Dutch asked. Caleb Vance? The man's gaze didn't waver from Eliza's face. I'll marry her. You know the terms? Dutch's voice had gone careful. This ain't a joke, son. Don't want the land or the cattle. Caleb climbed the steps slowly, his spurs ringing soft against the wood. Keep it. I'll marry her anyway. The square exploded into noise again. Eliza heard her father's voice raised in protest or question, heard the crowd's shocked muttering, heard her mother's sharp intake of breath. But she couldn't look away from the stranger who'd just volunteered to tie his life to hers. Up close, he was maybe 30. There were scars on his hands and a faded mark along his jaw that looked like it had come from a knife. His eyes were brown, not muddy like hers, but deep brown like creek water in shadow. They held hers steady, patient, like he was waiting for something. Why? The word came out before Eliza could stop it. One corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile. Seemed like you could use a hand. You don't know me. No, ma'am, I don't. She gestured helplessly at herself, at the dress that didn't fit, at the face that had launched this whole disaster, at everything she was and wasn't. You can see what I am. I can see you're still standing. His voice dropped lower, meant just for her. That's more than most folks manage. The preacher was there suddenly, looking between them with confusion and something like concern. Son, do you understand what you're agreeing to? This is a legal marriage, binding before the law, and I understand. Caleb looked at the preacher, then back at Eliza. If she'll have me. Everyone was staring at her. The whole town, waiting for her answer, waiting to see if she'd take this stranger or if she'd finally, mercifully, disappear from their sight forever. Eliza looked at Caleb Vance, really looked at him. His face gave nothing away. He wasn't doing this out of pity. She'd seen pity enough times to recognize it, and this wasn't that. He wasn't doing it for the land or the cattle because he'd already refused them. So why? It didn't matter. Not really, because the alternative was going back to her parents' house, living under the weight of her father's disappointment and her mother's shame until they died and left her alone in a world that had no place for women like her. "Yes," she said, "I'll have you." The preacher looked like he wanted to argue. Dutch looked like he'd just witnessed something he didn't understand. Her mother made a sound that could have been a sob or a laugh or both. But Caleb just nodded once, slow and certain. "Then let's get it done." The ceremony was quick, brutal in its efficiency. The preacher rushed through the words like he was afraid someone would come to their senses if he took too long. Eliza's hands shook so badly she could barely manage the ring, a plain band of silver that Caleb produced from his vest pocket, worn smooth like it had been waiting for a long time. When it came time to kiss, Caleb leaned in and pressed his lips to her forehead instead. Brief, gentle. Then he stepped back and offered her his arm. "Ready?" Eliza took his arm. The crowd parted as they walked down the steps and through the square. No one spoke. They just watched. Witnesses to the strangest wedding in the town's history, too shocked to do anything but stare. There was a horse tied up near the edge of the square, a big bay gelding with intelligent eyes and trail-worn tack. Caleb helped Eliza up onto the saddle, then swung up behind her. His arm came around her waist, steady and impersonal. "You can send her things to the old Riordan place," he said to no one in particular. "I'll be there through the week." Then he turned the horse and they rode out of town, dust rising behind them like a curtain falling on the worst day of Eliza's life. They rode in silence for what felt like hours. The sun climbed higher, beating down on Eliza's head and shoulders. She could feel Caleb behind her, the solid warmth of him, the steady rhythm of his breathing. His arm around her waist kept her from sliding off the horse, but otherwise he didn't touch her. The prairie stretched out in all directions, endless and golden and empty. Eliza had lived her whole life in this territory, but she'd never ventured far from town. Now she watched the familiar landmarks disappear behind them and felt something like vertigo. "Where are we going?" Her voice came out rough. "Ranch about 10 miles north of town. Belonged to a man named Sean Riordan. Bought it from his widow last month when she decided to move back east. Is it yours?" "It is now." More silence. Eliza's mind churned with questions she didn't know how to ask. "Why did you do this? What do you want from me? What happens now?" But she couldn't make herself speak. The shock was wearing off, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion that made her feel like she was moving through deep water. The ranch appeared gradually over a rise. It wasn't much. A small house with a sagging porch, a barn that needed new shingles, a corral with broken fencing. The land around it was good, though, rolling and green with a creek running through the eastern edge. Caleb dismounted first, then helped Eliza down. Her legs nearly gave out when her feet hit the ground. She grabbed the saddle horn to steady herself and felt his hand on her elbow, supporting her until she found her balance. "When's the last time you ate?" he asked. Eliza tried to remember. Yesterday? The day before? Her mother had been too anxious about the wedding to think about food, and Eliza's own stomach had been tied in knots. "I don't know." He studied her face, then nodded toward the house. "Go on inside. I'll see to the horse and bring in some supplies." The house was dim and cool after the harsh sunlight. One main room with a fireplace, a table, 2 chairs. A doorway led to what looked like a bedroom, another to a small kitchen. Everything was clean but bare, like someone had wiped away all traces of the previous occupants. Eliza stood in the middle of the room and felt the full weight of what had just happened settle over her like a physical thing. She was married, to a stranger, in a house she'd never seen before, miles from everything she'd ever known. She was someone's wife. The thought made her laugh, a short, sharp sound that echoed wrong in the empty room. Caleb came in carrying a crate of supplies. If he heard her laughing, he didn't comment on it. He set the crate on the table and started unpacking flour, coffee, dried beans, salt pork, a few canned goods. "There's a well out back," he said, still not looking at her. "Water's good. Chickens in the coop. They'll need feeding morning and evening. Barn needs work, but it'll hold for now." Eliza watched him move around the small space, efficient and sure. He knew where everything went, had obviously been here before, planning this. Planning something. Why? The question came out before she could stop it again. This time he did look at her, those dark eyes steady and unreadable. Why what? All of it, the marriage, bringing me here. You could have just not. You could have stayed quiet and none of this would be your problem. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled out one of the chairs and sat down, gesturing for her to take the other. When she hesitated, he said, "You're going to fall over if you don't sit down. You look half dead." She sat. Her hands were still shaking, so she folded them in her lap where he couldn't see. "I came into town this morning looking for supplies," Caleb said. "Saw the crowd in the square. Figured something was happening. By the time I realized what it was," he shook his head. "Seemed wrong. What they were doing to you seemed like someone should stop it. So you married me. That's a hell of a way to make a point. It's done now. You don't even know me. We'll figure it out." He stood up, moving toward the bedroom. "You take the bed. I'll sleep out here." "We're married," Eliza said numbly. "You don't have to—" "I know what I have to do." His voice was firm but not unkind. "You've had a hell of a day. Get some rest. We'll talk more tomorrow." He left her there, closing the bedroom door gently behind him. Eliza sat at the table until the shadows started to lengthen, until she couldn't feel her hands anymore, until the shock finally gave way to something that felt like grief but wasn't quite. Then she went into the bedroom, lay down on the narrow bed still wearing her mother's yellowed wedding dress, and stared at the ceiling until exhaustion finally pulled her under. Eliza woke to the sound of someone moving around in the main room. For a confused moment, she didn't know where she was. The ceiling was wrong, the bed was wrong, everything smelled like dust and strange soap. Then it all came rushing back. She sat up too fast and had to wait for the dizziness to pass. Through the doorway, she could see Caleb at the fireplace, coaxing a small flame to life. Early morning light filtered through the windows, pale and thin. "There's water in the basin," he said without turning around. "Coffee'll be ready in a minute." Eliza washed her face and hands, trying to ignore her reflection in the small mirror hanging on the wall. She looked like hell. Her hair had come loose from its pins and hung in tangles around her face. Her eyes were red and swollen. The dress, God, she was still wearing the dress, was wrinkled and stained with dust and sweat. She braided her hair back as best she could and went out to the main room. Caleb handed her a cup of coffee without comment. It was strong and bitter and exactly what she needed. They stood there in silence, drinking and watching the fire catch. "I'll ride into town today," Caleb finally said. "Pick up your things if they're ready. Anything else you need?" Eliza almost laughed. What did she need? A different face? A different life? A time machine to go back and be born as someone else? "No," she said. "Nothing." He studied her over the rim of his cup. "You always this talkative in the morning?" There, a hint of humor in his voice. It surprised her enough that she looked at him directly. His face was still hard to read, but there was something in his eyes that might have been amusement. "You married a stranger yesterday to save her from public humiliation," Eliza said. "I'm trying to figure out if you're crazy or stupid or just the worst judge of character in the territory." "Could be all three. That doesn't make me feel better." "Wasn't trying to make you feel better." He set down his cup. "Look, I know this ain't what you wanted. Hell, it ain't what I planned when I rode into town yesterday, but it's done now. We can make the best of it, or we can make each other miserable. Your choice." "Is it?" Eliza heard the bitterness in her own voice. "My choice? Because it seems like everyone else has been making my choices for me my whole life. Then here's your chance to change that." Caleb moved toward the door, grabbing his hat off a peg. "I'll be back before dark. There's food in the kitchen. Make yourself at home." He was gone before she could respond, the door closing with a soft click that somehow felt louder than a slam. Eliza stood alone in the quiet house and felt the walls pressing in. Make yourself at home. Like it was that simple. Like she could just decide to belong here, in this strange place with this strange man who'd married her for reasons she still didn't understand. She spent the day exploring. The house was small but solid, built by someone who knew what they were doing, even if time and weather had worn at the edges. The kitchen had a good stove and decent storage. The bedroom was spare but clean. There was a root cellar out back, mostly empty now, but lined with shelves that could hold preserves and vegetables when the season came. The barn was in worse shape than the house. Several boards were loose, and there was a hole in the roof big enough to let in rain. But the bones were good. With work, it could be repaired. Eliza found herself calculating what needed doing. The fencing, the the garden plot that was currently overrun with weeds, the chicken coop that listed to one side like a drunk man. All of it fixable, all of it work she knew how to do. She'd grown up working. Her father had 3 daughters, Eliza and her 2 older sisters, both married off years ago to men who'd actually wanted them. He'd raised all 3 girls to be useful, figuring that if Eliza couldn't attract a husband with her looks, she might at least earn one with her labor. It hadn't worked. But now she had the skills anyway. By the time Caleb returned, Eliza had fed the chickens, drawn water from the well, and started a list in her head of supplies they'd need. She was standing in the garden plot, mentally mapping out where to put what, when she heard the horse. He had a wagon with him this time, loaded with crates and bundles. Her things, she realized. The sum total of her life packed into 3 crates and 2 carpet bags. "They ready for you?" she asked as he climbed down from the wagon. "Your mother had it all packed." Caleb started unloading, carrying the crates into the house. Seemed eager to see it gone. Of course she had. Eliza was the problem that had finally been solved. Catherine Boone probably threw a party the second the door closed. The thought should have hurt. Strangely, it didn't. Eliza felt numb to it now, like a tooth that had ached for so long she'd stopped noticing the pain. She helped carry her things inside. Caleb watched her sort through the crates, clothes mostly, and a few personal items. A hairbrush her grandmother had given her. A book of poetry she'd read so many times the spine was broken. A quilt she'd made herself when she was 16, before she'd fully understood that no amount of domestic skill was going to make up for her face. "That everything?" Caleb asked. "That's everything." He nodded slowly. "I brought some other supplies too. Figured you might want to, I don't know, do whatever women do to make a place livable." Eliza looked at him. There was something almost awkward in the way he said it, like he wasn't sure what women did but figured it probably involved more than he'd thought to provide. "I'll need seeds," she said, "for the garden. And fabric. That chicken coop needs patching, and I saw holes in some of the shirts in your room." "My room? You're not sleeping on the floor forever. It's your house." "Our house," Caleb corrected. "You live here now, too." The words sat strange between them. Our house. Like they were really married. Like this was really a life they were building together instead of just a situation they were both trapped in. "I'll make a list," Eliza said finally, "of what we need, if you're going back to town, tomorrow." He moved toward the door again, always moving, never quite settling. "I'll start on the barn before the light goes." She watched him walk across the yard, his stride long and certain. Then she turned back to her crates and began the work of unpacking a life she'd never expected to have. Tropico. The days developed a rhythm. Caleb worked on the ranch, repairing fences, patching the barn roof, tending to the handful of cattle he'd bought from a neighboring spread. Eliza worked in and around the house, cooking, cleaning, starting a garden, mending everything that needed mending, and some things that didn't, just to keep her hands busy. They spoke when they needed to. Pass the salt. Fences fixed. Chicken coops done. Conversations that were functional, practical, empty of anything resembling intimacy. At night, Caleb slept on a bedroll in the main room. Eliza lay awake in the bedroom, listening to him move around, listening to the house settle, listening to her own thoughts circle like vultures. She kept waiting for him to change his mind, to realize what a mistake he'd made and send her back to town, back to her parents, back to being the daughter nobody wanted. She kept waiting for him to demand something from her, his rights as a husband, her body as payment for his charity. But he never did. He treated her with a distant courtesy that was somehow worse than cruelty would have been. At least cruelty she understood. 2 weeks passed. Then 3. The garden began to show green shoots. The barn stood straight again. Eliza's hands developed new calluses and her face burned brown from the sun. She learned things about Caleb without him telling her. He woke before dawn every day. He took his coffee black and barely touched sugar. He had nightmares sometimes. She could hear him through the wall, his breathing going harsh and fast before he jerked awake. He was left-handed. He favored his right leg like an old injury pained him. When he thought she wasn't looking, his face went hard and distant, like he was seeing something she couldn't. But he never talked about it, never talked about anything that mattered. One evening, Eliza was washing dishes when she finally snapped. "Why won't you talk to me?" Caleb looked up from the harness he was mending. "What? We've been married almost a month. We live in the same house. We eat at the same table. And I know exactly nothing about you. What do you want to know?" Anything. Everything. Why you're here. Where you came from. Why you don't sleep in your own bed. Why you married a woman you'd never met just to save her from embarrassment. Her voice was rising, but she couldn't stop it. I need to understand. I need to know what you want from me. Caleb set down the harness slowly. I don't want anything from you. That's not true. Everyone wants something. Then maybe I already got what I wanted. Which is what? A live-in cook? A housekeeper? Someone to feel superior to? His jaw tightened. That what you think? I don't know what to think. Eliza threw down the dish towel. You won't talk to me. You barely look at me. Half the time I think you regret this whole thing, and the other half I think you're just too polite to say so. I don't regret it. Then why? She gestured helplessly between them. Why this? Why the distance? Why marry me at all if you were just going to treat me like a stranger? Caleb stood up. For a moment she thought he was going to leave, just walk out like he did whenever a conversation got too close to something real. But instead he moved closer, and Eliza found herself backing up against the counter. You want to know why? His voice was low but intense. Because I watched you stand there in that town square and take everything they threw at you without breaking. Because every man there looked away, but you kept your head up. Because you deserved better than what they were doing to you, and I had the power to stop it. He stopped, close enough now that she could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. That enough truth for you? Eliza's heart was pounding. You don't know me. How do you know I deserved anything? I know enough. You know nothing. You don't know that I'm difficult, that I have a temper, that my own mother can barely stand to look at me. You don't know anything about who I really am. So tell me. The words hung between them, a challenge and an invitation all at once. Eliza opened her mouth and found she had no idea what to say. How could she explain a lifetime of being unwanted? How could she make him understand what it was like to grow up knowing you were a disappointment to everyone who'd ever looked at you? I don't know how, she finally whispered. Something in Caleb's face softened. Not much, but enough that she noticed. Then we'll figure it out, together, same as everything else. He stepped back, giving her space. I keep my distance because I don't want you to feel pressured. This wasn't your choice, not really. You needed a way out, and I gave you one. But that doesn't mean you owe me anything. Doesn't mean I get to demand anything. Understanding hit her like cold water. You think I'm afraid of you. You should be. You don't know me either. Are you dangerous? I've been dangerous. His voice went quiet. I've done things I'm not proud of. Hurt people who maybe deserved it, and some who didn't. That's why I'm here, in the middle of nowhere, trying to build something clean. Eliza studied his face. The scars made sense now. The nightmares, the way he wore his gun like it was part of him. What did you do? Nothing I'm going to tell you about tonight. He picked up his hat. I'll be in the barn. Caleb. He stopped at the door. Thank you, Eliza said, for telling me the truth. Or part of it, anyway. He nodded once and disappeared into the darkness. Eliza stood in the quiet kitchen and felt something shift inside her chest. It wasn't much, but it was a start. That conversation became a turning point, though not in any way Eliza expected. Caleb didn't suddenly open up and pour out his life story. He didn't start treating her differently. But something had cracked in the wall between them, and through that crack came small things, details, fragments of truth. A few days later, while they were eating breakfast, he said, I was a lawman before this, down in Arizona territory. Eliza looked up from her eggs, careful not to seem too eager. What happened? Got tired of it. Tired of the violence. Tired of watching men die over things that didn't matter. He stared at his coffee. Tired of being the one who made them die. She waited, but that was all he offered. It was enough for now. Another day, she asked him about the scar on his jaw. He touched it absently, like he'd forgotten it was there. Knife fight and tombstone. Other man didn't walk away. You kill him? Yeah. No apology, no justification. Just the flat truth of it. Eliza found she appreciated that more than any excuse would have been. Slowly, piece by piece, she began to understand the man she'd married. He'd been a U.S. Marshal for 7 years. He'd tracked outlaws across 3 territories. He'd killed men. He never said how many, and she never asked. He'd seen things that still woke him up at night, gasping and reaching for a gun that wasn't there. And then one day, he'd walked away from all of it, sold everything he had, bought this failing ranch from a widow who just wanted to go home, and decided to build something that didn't involve blood. "Why here?" Eliza asked one evening. They were sitting on the porch, watching the sun sink toward the horizon. It had become a habit, these quiet evenings. Not talking, exactly, but being together in a way that felt less hostile than it had at first. "Why not here?" Caleb said. "You could have gone anywhere. Somewhere easier. Somewhere already built up." Didn't want easy, wanted empty. He gestured at the prairie stretching out around them. Wanted space between me and everything else. "And then you went and got married." He looked at her sidelong. "Didn't plan on that part." "Regret it yet?" "Asked me that before." "I'm asking again." Caleb was quiet for a long moment. "No," he finally said. "I don't regret it. You work hard, don't complain. Garden's coming in nice." Eliza felt something twist in her chest. "That's what you like about me? That I work hard and don't complain?" "That's part of it. What's the rest?" He stood up, stretching. Still figuring that out. It wasn't a declaration of love, it wasn't even particularly romantic. But coming from Caleb, it felt like something. Like maybe she wasn't just a burden he'd taken on out of misplaced nobility. The problem was, Eliza was figuring things out too. And what she was figuring out scared her. She'd started noticing things about him. The way his hands moved when he worked, efficient and sure. The rare times he smiled, usually at something the horse did, and how it changed his whole face. The way he was careful around her, always giving her space, never crowding or demanding. She noticed how he fixed things without being asked. How he brought her coffee in the morning before she was fully awake. How he'd started leaving wildflowers on the table, not saying anything about them, just setting them there like they'd appeared on their own. She noticed, and it terrified her. Because she'd been unwanted her whole life. She knew how to live with rejection. She knew how to build walls around the soft parts of herself so nothing could get through and hurt her. But she didn't know how to want something, didn't know how to hope for something. And the thought of wanting Caleb, really wanting him, wanting this marriage to be real, felt like standing on the edge of a cliff with nothing but air beneath her. 6 weeks into the marriage, a storm rolled in. Eliza saw it coming from miles away. Dark clouds piling up on the western horizon, the air going still and heavy. She'd lived through prairie storms before. They were violent and fast, and you either prepared or you paid for it. She spent the afternoon securing everything she could, brought the chickens into the barn, tied down anything that might blow away, drew extra water from the well, and brought it inside. By the time Caleb rode in from checking the fence line, she had the house as ready as it was going to get. "Gonna be a bad one," he said, looking at the sky. The clouds were green-black now, rolling like something alive. "How bad?" "Bad enough. We'll need to get the horses into the barn." They worked together, moving quickly but not panicking. The wind was picking up, gusting hard enough to snatch words away. By the time they got the animals secured and made it back to the house, the first drops were starting to fall. Big drops. Heavy. The kind that hit like stones. Then the sky opened up and it was like standing under a waterfall. Thunder cracked so loud it shook the walls. Lightning turned the world white for seconds at a time, burning afterimages into Eliza's vision. Caleb moved through the house, checking the windows, making sure everything was sealed tight. Eliza lit the lamps, trying to push back the darkness that the storm had brought hours too early. "We're solid," Caleb said. "House has been through worse." "You sure about that?" As if in answer, another crack of thunder rattled the dishes in the cupboard. Eliza flinched despite herself. "You scared of storms?" Caleb asked. "No." Then more honestly. "Yes, a little. When I was 8, a tornado went through a farm about 5 miles from ours, killed the whole family, tore their house to pieces like it was made of paper. This isn't tornado weather, just a thunderstorm." "Just a thunderstorm," Eliza repeated, but her hands were shaking as she wrapped them around her coffee cup. The storm settled in for the night. The rain came in waves, sometimes easing off to a steady drum, sometimes hammering down so hard they couldn't hear each other speak. The wind howled around the corners of the house, finding every gap and crack. Eliza tried to keep herself busy. She made dinner, though neither of them ate much. She mended a shirt by lamplight, though her stitches were uneven and she had to redo half of them. She told herself she was fine, that this was just weather, that there was nothing to be afraid of. Then lightning struck something close. The crack was so loud Eliza screamed. The lamp on the table flickered and went out, plunging them into darkness broken only by the fireplace and the occasional flash of lightning through the windows. "Hey!" Caleb's voice came from somewhere to her left. "You're all right." "I know," but her voice was shaking. Her whole body was shaking. She felt him move closer. "Eliza, I'm fine. I'm sorry. I don't know why I'm—" Another crack of thunder cut her off. She couldn't help it. She curled in on herself, arms wrapped tight around her middle. Then Caleb's hands were on her shoulders, steady and warm. "Come here." He guided her to the chair by the fireplace and sat her down. Then he pulled the other chair close, closer than he'd ever sat to her before, and took her hands in his. "Look at me," he said quietly. Eliza forced herself to meet his eyes. In the firelight, they looked almost black. "House is solid. Roof's good. We're safe here. Nothing's going to happen to you." "You can't promise that." "I can promise I won't let anything happen to you if I can help it. That good enough?" It shouldn't have been, but somehow it was. Eliza focused on his hands holding hers. They were calloused and scarred, but gentle. She focused on his voice, calm and certain, even with the storm raging outside. "Tell me something," she said. "Anything. Just talk to me so I don't have to listen to it." Caleb was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "My wife died 3 years ago." Eliza's breath caught. "What?" "Her name was Sarah. We were married 5 years. She got sick, fever, and there wasn't anything anyone could do. She died in the winter. I buried her in the spring when the ground thawed enough to dig." "I'm sorry," Eliza whispered. "That's when I quit being a marshal. Couldn't see the point anymore. Spent 2 years drifting, not really caring what happened. Took jobs that paid. Did things I'm not proud of." He paused. "Then one day I woke up and realized I was either going to die or I was going to live. Had to choose." "So you chose to live." "I chose to try. Bought this place. Figured I'd work the land, keep my head down, stay away from people." His thumb moved across the back of her hand, probably unconsciously. "And then I saw you standing in that town square and all those people laughing at you, and I couldn't walk away." "Why not?" "Because you looked like I felt, like the world had beaten you down and you were still standing anyway, out of pure spite if nothing else." He met her eyes. "I recognized that. Recognized you." The storm was still raging outside, but Eliza barely heard it anymore. "You never told me you'd been married before." "Didn't seem fair. You're my wife now. Didn't want you thinking you were second choice or replacement or anything like that." "Aren't I, though?" "No." The word came out firm. "Sarah's gone. She's been gone. What we had was good, but it's over. You're not her. Don't want you to be her." "What do you want me to be?" Caleb looked at her for a long moment. "I want you to be you, whoever that is. I want you to feel safe here. Want you to know that this is your home as much as it is mine. Want you to stop looking at me like you're waiting for me to throw you out." "I don't—" "You do. I see it. Every time you think I'm not looking, you get this expression like you're bracing yourself. Like you expect me to tell you it was all a mistake." Eliza pulled her hands away, suddenly feeling exposed. "Can you blame me? My whole life, everyone's made it clear I'm not enough. Not pretty enough, not charming enough, not anything enough. Why would you be any different? Because I'm not everyone else. You're a stranger who married me to stop a public humiliation. That's not exactly a foundation for lasting devotion." "No," Caleb agreed. "It's not. But it's what we've got. And we can build on it or we can let it crumble. That's up to both of us." Another crack of thunder, but this time Eliza didn't flinch. She was too focused on Caleb's face, trying to read what was behind his words. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I don't regret marrying you. I'm saying you're not a burden or a charity case. I'm saying that maybe this started strange, but it doesn't have to stay that way." He leaned forward slightly. "I'm saying I'd like to try. If you're willing." "Try what?" "Being married. Really married. Not just two people living in the same house pretending we don't exist to each other." Eliza's heart was pounding. "And if I'm not willing? If I want to keep things the way they are? Then we keep things the way they are." I'm not going to force anything on you, Eliza. I told you that from the start. But you'd prefer it, to try. Yeah, I would. She studied his face. There was vulnerability there, carefully controlled but visible if you knew to look for it. He was taking a risk, saying this, admitting he wanted something from her, that he wanted her in whatever capacity she'd allow. And Eliza realized she was at a crossroads. She could say no, keep her walls up, keep herself safe, continue living this half-life where she was protected from rejection because she never put herself in a position to be rejected, or she could say yes. Let those walls come down, risk everything on the possibility that maybe, just maybe, Caleb meant what he said. I'm scared, she said quietly. Of me, of this, of wanting something and having it taken away. I don't know if I can survive that again. Again? Eliza looked away. Every time I let myself hope for something, a friend, a future, anything, it got taken away. My sisters got married and moved away and forgot I existed. The few girls who tried to be kind to me got pulled away by their mothers who didn't want them associating with the ugly Boone girl. Even my parents. She stopped, swallowing hard. Even my parents looked at me like I was something they had to tolerate, like I was proof they'd done something wrong. You're not wrong, Caleb said fiercely. There's nothing wrong with you. You don't know that. You barely know me. I know enough. And what I know, I like. Why? Because I work hard? Because I don't complain? Those aren't reasons to want someone. They're part of it. But there's more. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he touched her face, his hand cupping her jaw. You're strong. You're stubborn. You speak your mind when you're mad, even though you're scared. You sing when you work in the garden, and you don't think anyone's listening. Eliza felt heat rise in her cheeks. You heard that? I hear a lot of things. Like how you talk to the chickens like they're people. How you laugh when you're alone and something strikes you funny. How you're gentle with everything except yourself. I don't. You do. You're hard on yourself, harder than anyone else would be. And I'd like to see you stop doing that. See you believe you're worth something. Tears stung Eliza's eyes. She blinked them back furiously. Don't say things like that if you don't mean them. I mean them. How can you? You've known me 6 weeks. Known you long enough to see who you are. Known you long enough to want to keep seeing it. The tears spilled over despite her best efforts. Eliza wiped at them angrily, hating that she was crying, hating that she was weak enough to break down over a few kind words. But Caleb didn't seem bothered. He just pulled her forward, guiding her head to his shoulder, and let her cry. His hand moved in slow circles on her back, steady and patient, while outside the storm raged and inside something fragile and terrified began to crack open. When the tears finally slowed, Eliza pulled back, embarrassed. I'm sorry. Don't be. I got your shirt wet. I've survived worse. He studied her face. You need to sleep. Come on. He stood and held out his hand. After a moment's hesitation, Eliza took it. He led her to the bedroom, but when she expected him to leave, he didn't. I'll stay, he said. Just until you fall asleep, if that's all right. It should have terrified her, having him that close, in the intimate space of the bedroom. But instead she felt relief. Stay, she said. Eliza lay down on this bed, still fully clothed. Caleb pulled the quilt over her, then settled himself in the chair by the window. Not close enough to touch, but close enough that she could see him in the dim light from the fireplace. Caleb? Yeah? Thank you for telling me about Sarah. I know that wasn't easy. Needed to be said. He was quiet for a moment. She would have liked you, I think. She was tough too, stubborn, didn't take anything from anyone. I'm not trying to replace her. I know. Told you that already. Eliza closed her eyes, listening to the rain. It had eased off a little, no longer pounding quite so hard. Will you tell me about her sometime? Not tonight, but sometime. If you want. I do. She drifted off with the sound of rain on the roof and the knowledge that Caleb was watching over her. For the first time since the wedding, she felt something that might have been safety. When she woke in the morning, he was gone. But there was fresh coffee waiting, and the sun was out, and the world looked clean and new. The days after the storm were different, not dramatically. But there were small shifts. Caleb started sleeping in the bedroom, on the floor at first, then on the bed when Eliza insisted she felt ridiculous taking up the whole thing while he camped on hard wood. They slept with space between them, a careful distance, but they were in the same room, breathing the same air. They talked more. Real conversations, not just functional exchanges. Caleb told her about tracking outlaws through the desert, about close calls and narrow escapes, about men he'd arrested and men he'd killed and the difference between justice and revenge. He didn't sugarcoat it, didn't try to make himself sound heroic. He just told her the truth. Eliza talked too, though she had less dramatic stories to share. She told him about growing up as the ugly daughter, about the casual cruelties of small-town life, about her sisters who'd escaped and never looked back, about her mother's disappointment and her father's desperate attempts to fix what couldn't be fixed. "They sold you," Caleb said one night. His voice was flat, but his jaw was tight. "That's what it was. They sold you to the highest bidder. They were trying to secure my future. They were trying to get rid of a problem. There's a difference." Eliza couldn't argue with that. It was what she'd always known, deep down, even if she'd never let herself think it so plainly. 2 months into the marriage, they went to town together for the first time. Eliza had been dreading it, but they needed supplies that couldn't wait. The ride-in was quiet. Caleb sensed her tension, but he didn't push. He just kept the horse at a steady pace and occasionally glanced at her to make sure she was holding together. When the town came into view, Eliza's stomach twisted into knots. She could see the square where she'd been humiliated, could practically hear the laughter echoing across the distance. "You don't have to do this," Caleb said. "I can get the supplies. You can wait at the edge of town." "No." Eliza straightened her spine. "I live here now. I can't hide forever." "Not hiding, just avoiding unnecessary pain." "Same thing." They rode into town just after noon. People noticed immediately. Eliza saw heads turn, saw whispers starting, but nobody laughed, nobody pointed. They just watched, wary and curious. Caleb helped her down from the horse and offered his arm. Eliza took it, grateful for the solid presence of him beside her. They went to the general store first. Old Mr. Peterson was behind the counter and his eyebrows shot up when he saw them. "Mrs. Vance," he said carefully, "wasn't expecting to see you." "Mr. Peterson." Eliza kept her voice level. "We need supplies." Caleb handed over the list. While Peterson gathered the items, Eliza browsed the store, hyper-aware of every other customer, every glance in her direction. Sarah Mitchell was there with her daughter. Sarah had been one of the girls who'd tried to befriend Eliza when they were young, before Sarah's mother had put a stop to it. Now Sarah gave her a small, uncertain smile. "Eliza, it's good to see you looking well." "Thank you, Sarah. I heard you'd married. I'm glad things worked out." The words were awkward but genuine. Eliza felt something loosen in her chest. "So am I." They gathered the supplies and loaded them onto the wagon. Caleb was quiet, watchful, his hand never far from his gun. Eliza realized he was ready to defend her if anyone said anything cruel. The thought made her feel protected and irritated in equal measure. "I can handle myself," she said as they climbed back onto the wagon. "Never said you couldn't." "You're hovering." "I'm being careful. There's a difference." They were about to leave when Thomas Whitmore appeared, the man who'd rejected her at the altar. He looked uncomfortable, his face red. "Eliza," he said, "can I have a word?" Caleb tensed. "She doesn't owe you anything." "I know, Thomas looked at Eliza. "I wanted to apologize. For what I did. For how I did it. It was cruel and cowardly, and you didn't deserve it." Eliza stared at him. An apology. After 2 months. After humiliating her in front of the entire town. "Why now?" she asked. "Because I've been thinking about it. Because I was wrong. Because..." He glanced at Caleb, then back to her. "Because you look happy, or at least happier than you looked at the wedding. And I realized I made the biggest mistake of my life walking away from you." "You're right," Eliza said. "You did make a mistake, but not the way you think." Thomas frowned. "What?" "Your mistake wasn't walking away from me. Your mistake was agreeing to marry me in the first place when you knew you didn't want to. Your mistake was standing there and letting it get that far before you humiliated me publicly." She stepped closer. "You could have said no when my father first approached you. You could have been honest. Instead, you were a coward, twice. I know. That's why I'm apologizing. I don't accept your apology, and I don't forgive you. What you did to me, what everyone did to me that day, that's not something you get to fix with words 2 months later. Thomas's face went redder. I'm trying to make it right. You can't. It's done. But you know what? I'm glad it happened. The words surprised even Eliza, but she realized they were true. Because if you'd married me, I'd be stuck with a man who was ashamed of me. Instead, I'm with someone who chose me, who wants me, who sees something in me besides a burden to carry. She turned to Caleb, who was watching her with something that might have been pride. Let's go home, she said. They left Thomas standing in the street, looking lost. As they rode out of town, Eliza felt lighter than she had in months, maybe years. That felt good, she said. Caleb glanced at her. What did? Standing up for myself, not apologizing for existing. I've spent my whole life making myself smaller, trying not to be too much trouble. And for what? So people could tolerate me. You don't need to be tolerated. You need to be appreciated. Is that what you do? Appreciate me? Getting there, he paused. Getting there faster than I expected. Eliza felt warmth spread through her chest. It wasn't a declaration of love, but it was honest, and she was learning that honesty from Caleb was worth more than pretty lies from anyone else. They rode in comfortable silence for a while. Then Caleb said, You handled that well. Standing up to him. I was terrified. Didn't show. Good. Eliza looked at the prairie stretching out around them. I don't want to be afraid anymore. I don't want to spend my life waiting for people to reject me. Then don't. It's not that simple, isn't it? You decide how you're going to live. Nobody else gets that choice. Eliza thought about that, about choice, about deciding who she was going to be instead of letting others define her. I want to be braver, she said quietly. You're already brave. You just don't see it yet. How am I brave? I hid from the world for 24 years. You survived. That takes courage. Caleb looked at her. You got dealt a bad hand and you played it the best you could. You worked when you wanted to quit. You stood when you wanted to fall. You kept going when everyone told you there was no point. That's brave. Eliza felt tears threatening again. She was crying so much lately, but this time they were different. Not tears of pain or fear, but something else. Something that felt almost like hope. I don't know how to do this, she admitted. How to believe what you're saying. Practice. Same as anything else. It's not going to happen overnight. Good. I'm not going anywhere. They arrived back at the ranch as the sun was starting to set. The house looked small and weathered against the big sky, but it also looked like home. Their home. Caleb helped her down from the wagon, and they stood there for a moment, not quite touching, but not far apart either. Thank you, Eliza said, for coming with me. For everything. You would have been fine on your own. Maybe. But I'm glad I didn't have to be. Something shifted in Caleb's expression. He raised his hand slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered against her cheek. Eliza, he said quietly. Yeah? I need to tell you something. Her heart started pounding. Okay. That first day in the town square, I didn't marry you just to stop what was happening. That was part of it, but he stopped, choosing his words carefully. I looked at you and I saw someone I wanted to know. Someone strong and real and worth knowing. I didn't know if you'd ever want more than a marriage on paper, and I was fine with that if it's what you needed. But I want you to know that I see you, really see you, and what I see is worth seeing. Eliza's breath caught. Caleb, you don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know. But Eliza did have something to say. She'd been carrying it around for weeks now, this growing feeling that she didn't know how to name. And if Caleb could be brave enough to be honest, then maybe she could too. I see you too, she said, and I'm starting to think that maybe this marriage doesn't have to be just on paper. If you're willing, if you want that. Caleb's eyes searched hers. You sure? No, I'm terrified, but I'm willing to try. He smiled then, a real smile, wide and genuine. It transformed his whole face, made him look younger, less burdened. Then we'll try together, he said. He leaned down slowly, giving her every opportunity to change her mind. When his lips met hers, it was gentle, careful, question more than a claim. Eliza kissed him back, her hands coming up to rest on his chest. She could feel his heart beating, as fast as hers. When they pulled apart, she was breathless. That was, she started. Yeah, Caleb agreed. They stood there grinning at each other like fools until the horse stamped impatiently, reminding them they still had supplies to unload. The work of building something real had begun. And for the first time in her life, Eliza believed it might actually work. The kiss changed things, but not in the ways Eliza expected. She'd thought maybe everything would suddenly become easy, that admitting they wanted to try would magically erase all the uncertainty between them. Instead, it made things more complicated, because now there was something to lose. They were careful with each other in the days that followed. Too careful, maybe. Caleb would reach for her hand and then pull back, second-guessing himself. Eliza would start to say something and then swallow the words, afraid they'd sound stupid or needy. They circled each other like strangers learning a new dance, trying not to step on each other's feet. At night, they still slept with space between them. Caleb on his side of the bed, Eliza on hers, the middle ground a no-man's land neither of them dared to cross. Sometimes Eliza would wake in the darkness and hear his breathing, steady and deep, and wonder what he was dreaming about. Sometimes she'd catch him watching her across the breakfast table with an expression she couldn't quite read. It was maddening and confusing, and somehow still better than the distance they'd maintained before. 3 days after that first kiss, Eliza was working in the garden when she heard a horse approaching. She straightened, shading her eyes against the sun. A woman was riding toward the house, and as she got closer, Eliza's stomach dropped. Catherine Boone, her mother. Eliza wiped her hands on her apron, her mind racing. In the 2 months since the wedding, her mother hadn't visited once, hadn't sent word, nothing. And now here she was, riding up like she had every right. Catherine dismounted with practiced ease. She was wearing her good dress, the dark blue one she saved for town. Her hair was pulled back tight, and her face was set in the expression Eliza knew too well, the one that said she was here to deliver a lecture. "Mother," Eliza said, keeping her voice neutral. "Eliza." Catherine looked her over, taking in the dirt under her fingernails, the sun-darkened skin, the work dress that was patched at the hem. "You look like a field hand." "I've been working in the field." "Clearly." Catherine glanced around. "Where's your husband?" "North pasture, checking the fence line." "Alone?" "He doesn't need a nursemaid to ride his own property." Catherine's lips thinned. "Don't take that tone with me." Eliza bit back the response she wanted to give. Instead, she said, "Would you like to come inside? I can make coffee." They went into the house. Eliza put the coffee on while Catherine examined everything with a critical eye. The sparse furniture, the simple curtains Eliza had made from spare fabric, the wildflowers on the table that were already starting to wilt. "This is quite rustic," Catherine finally said. "It's home. It's barely more than a shack. It's what we have. We're working on it." Eliza poured the coffee, her hands steadier than she expected. "Why are you here, Mother?" Catherine settled into a chair, arranging her skirts. "Can't a mother visit her daughter?" "You haven't visited in 2 months. I wanted to give you time to settle in, to adjust." Catherine sipped her coffee, made a face at the strength of it. "I came to see how you're managing." "I'm managing fine." "Are you?" Catherine's eyes were sharp. "Because I've heard talk in town. People saying you looked thin, tired, saying your husband barely speaks to you in public. People should mind their own business. People talk. That's what they do. And when a girl marries a complete stranger under such circumstances, naturally there are concerns." Eliza felt anger building in her chest. "What circumstances? You mean when you and Father tried to auction me off to the highest bidder? We were trying to secure your future. You were trying to solve a problem. I was the problem. And now that I'm gone, you can pretend I never existed." Catherine's face went pale, then red. "That's not fair." "Isn't it? You haven't come to see me. You haven't sent word asking if I'm all right. You packed my things before the wedding was even over. You couldn't get rid of me fast enough. You ungrateful—" Catherine stopped herself, visibly gathering control. "I came here out of concern. Your father was worried." "Father was worried, or you felt guilty?" "Both." "Is that what you want to hear? That I feel badly about how things turned out?" That I wish it had been different? I want to know if you ever actually cared about me, Eliza said quietly, or if I was always just the daughter you were stuck with, the one who wasn't pretty enough or charming enough or good enough to make you proud. Catherine looked away. For a long moment, the only sound was the ticking of the clock on the mantel. You don't understand what it's like, Catherine finally said, watching your daughter grow up and knowing she's going to have a hard life, knowing that people will judge her, reject her, hurt her. I wanted to protect you from that. By making me feel worthless? By preparing you for reality? By making sure you understood that life wasn't going to be kind to you, that you'd have to work harder than everyone else just to get by. You did that all right. You prepared me so well that I believed I didn't deserve anything good, that I should be grateful for any scrap of attention anyone gave me. Eliza's voice was shaking now. Do you know what that's like? Growing up in a house where your own mother can barely stand to look at you? I looked at you, Catherine said, her voice rising. I looked at you every day and saw myself, saw the same plain face, the same awkward body. And I knew exactly what you were going to go through because I went through it too. Eliza stared at her mother, seeing her as if for the first time. Catherine Boone had been considered plain in her youth. Eliza knew that from comments relatives had made. She'd married Marcus Boone not for love, but for security, for a house and a future. And her older daughters had taken after their father, had been blessed with features that made marriage easy. But Eliza had gotten her mother's looks, and Catherine had hated her for it. So you punish me for reminding you of yourself, Eliza said. That's what you're saying. I tried to toughen you up, to make you strong enough to survive. You tried to break me so I'd be easier to manage, so I wouldn't hope for anything better. Eliza stood up. Well, it didn't work. I'm still here. I'm still standing, and I found something better despite everything you did to convince me I didn't deserve it. Catherine stood too. That man doesn't love you. You don't know that. He married you out of pity, or pride, or because he needed a housekeeper, but not out of love. Men don't marry women like us out of love, Eliza. The sooner you accept that, the less it will hurt when he leaves. He's not leaving. You don't know that either. You've known him 3 months. You don't know who he really is or what he's capable of. The door opened before Eliza could respond. Caleb stood in the doorway, taking in the scene. His eyes moved from Eliza's flushed face to Catherine's rigid posture, and his expression hardened. Mrs. Boone, he said evenly. Mr. Vance, I was just visiting my daughter. I can see that. Caleb moved into the room, and somehow his presence made it feel smaller. He positioned himself slightly in front of Eliza, not obviously protective, but clearly creating a barrier. Everything all right? Fine, Eliza said. At the same time, Catherine said, We're having a private conversation. Doesn't sound very private, Caleb said. I could hear you from outside. Catherine's face flushed. I should go. I've said what I came to say. Which was what, exactly? Caleb's voice was mild, but there was steel underneath. Because, from what I heard, you came here to tell my wife that she's not worthy of being loved. That about right? I came to make sure she understands her situation. Her situation is that she's my wife. She lives in my house, and anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me. He held Catherine's gaze. That includes her own mother. Catherine drew herself up. I'm trying to protect her. From what? From being happy? From believing she deserves good things? Caleb shook his head. With all due respect, ma'am, the only thing Eliza needs protecting from is people who make her feel small. And right now, that's you. The silence that followed was thick enough to cut. Catherine's face went through several expressions, shock, anger, humiliation, before settling on cold dignity. I see, she said. Well, I won't impose any further. She moved toward the door, then stopped and looked back at Eliza. For a second, something that might have been regret flickered across her face. I did the best I could, she said quietly. That's all any of us can do. Then she was gone, leaving behind only the sound of hoofbeats fading into the distance. Eliza stood frozen, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. She felt like she'd been hollowed out, scraped raw. Hey, Caleb's voice was gentle. You all right? I don't know. Eliza's voice came out strange. I don't know what I am. He moved closer, and this time when he reached for her, he didn't pull back. His arms came around her, solid and steady, and Eliza leaned into him, letting him take some of her weight. "She's wrong," Caleb said into her hair. "About all of it. You know that, right?" "Do I?" "Eliza?" He pulled back enough to look at her face. "I didn't marry you out of pity. I didn't marry you because I needed a housekeeper. I married you because I wanted to, because something in me recognized something in you, and I knew I'd regret it if I let you walk away. That's not love." "No, it's not. Not yet." His honesty was brutal, but somehow comforting. "But it could be, if we let it, if we stop being so scared of it." Eliza looked up at him, this man who'd crashed into her life and turned everything upside down. His face was serious, his dark eyes searching hers. "I am scared," she admitted. "My mother's right about one thing. I don't really know you, and you don't really know me. What if we're making a mistake? What if this doesn't work? Then it doesn't work. But at least we tried." Caleb's hand came up to cup her face. "Eliza, I've made a lot of mistakes in my life, hurt people, done things I can't take back. But marrying you, that's not one of them. And I need you to believe that." "I want to." "Then start with that. Want to believe it. Practice believing it. And eventually maybe it'll stick." Eliza closed her eyes, feeling his thumb brush across her cheekbone. "She said you'd leave. That men like you don't stay with women like me." "Men like me?" "Men who could have anyone. Men who are strong and capable and don't need anyone else." Caleb made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sigh. "Eliza, I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to really hear it. I'm not strong. I'm broken in ways you haven't even seen yet. I wake up most nights in a cold sweat from nightmares about things I've done. I've killed men, and I remember every face. I drink too much sometimes trying to forget, and it never works. I'm not some hero who rescued you. I'm just a man trying to build something that doesn't have blood on it." He paused, his jaw working. "So when you say I could have anyone, you're wrong. I couldn't. Most women would take one look at what I've been and run the other direction. But you? You looked at me and you didn't run. You took a chance on me, same as I took a chance on you. We're both taking a risk here, both trying to be better than we were. And that's worth something." Eliza opened her eyes. "You really believe that?" "I have to. Otherwise, what's the point of any of this?" She studied his face, looking for the lie, the catch, the place where his words didn't match reality. But all she saw was raw honesty, the kind that hurt to look at. "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay. Okay. I'll try. To believe it. To believe you. To believe that maybe this could work." Caleb's expression softened. "That's all I'm asking." He kissed her then, slow and careful, like she was something precious that might break. And Eliza kissed him back, trying to pour into it all the things she didn't know how to say. When they pulled apart, she felt steadier. Not fixed. She didn't think she'd ever be fully fixed, but steadier. "Your mother's not going to change," Caleb said. "You know that, right?" "I know. You're going to have to decide what kind of relationship you want with her, if you want one at all." Eliza thought about that, about Catherine Boone and all the years of small cruelties and quiet disappointments, about the mother who'd looked at her and seen only her own failures reflected back. "I don't know yet," she admitted, "but I know I don't want to keep waiting for her approval, waiting for her to tell me I'm good enough, because she never will. No, she probably won't. That should hurt more than it does. Maybe you're just tired of hurting." Eliza nodded slowly. That felt true. She'd spent so much of her life in pain, carrying around the weight of everyone else's disappointment. Maybe it was time to put it down. They spent the rest of the day working together. Caleb fixed the loose board on the porch while Eliza weeded the garden. They didn't talk much, but the silence felt comfortable instead of strained. Every so often, Eliza would catch him looking at her, and he'd smile, that rare, genuine smile that made her chest feel tight. That night, they lay in bed with the window open, letting in the cool air and the sound of crickets. They were still on their respective sides, but somehow the space between them didn't feel quite as wide. "Caleb?" Eliza said into the darkness. "Yeah?" "Thank you for what you said to my mother, for standing up for me. Don't need to thank me for that. I do, though. Nobody's ever done that before, defended me like that." He was quiet for a moment. Get used to it. Because I'm going to keep doing it. Eliza felt warmth spread through her chest. Can I ask you something? Always. When you said you have nightmares, what are they about? She felt him tense beside her. You sure you want to know? Only if you want to tell me. Caleb was silent for so long that Eliza thought he might not answer. Then he said, There was a man. 5 years ago. I tracked him for weeks across Arizona territory. He'd killed 3 people in a robbery gone wrong. When I finally caught up to him, he was holed up in a farmhouse with a family inside, used them as hostages. He paused, and Eliza waited. The standoff lasted 2 days. I tried to negotiate, tried everything I could think of, but he wasn't going to surrender, and eventually he started killing the hostages, one by one, trying to force my hand. Oh no, Eliza breathed. I went in, shot him before he could kill the last one. A little girl, maybe 8 years old. Saved her life, did my job. Caleb's voice was flat now, emotionless. But the other 3 died because I couldn't find a better way. Because I wasn't fast enough, or smart enough, or something enough. That wasn't your fault. Wasn't it? I was the lawman. I was supposed to protect people, and I let 3 innocent people die. You saved one. You saved the little girl. I tell myself that. But at night, when I dream, I see the ones I didn't save. I see their faces. And I wonder if there was something I could have done differently. Eliza turned on her side to face him. In the moonlight coming through the window, she could see his profile, the hard line of his jaw. Is that why you quit? She asked gently. Part of it. After Sarah died and I didn't have anything tying me to that life anymore, I realized I couldn't keep doing it. Couldn't keep carrying around all that death and pretending it didn't weigh anything. He turned to look at her. I needed to build something instead of destroying things, even if I'm not very good at it yet. You're doing fine. You don't know that. This ranch is barely holding together. I'm making it up as I go. So am I, Eliza said. With all of it. The ranch, the marriage, everything. I have no idea what I'm doing. Then we're both faking it. Maybe that's okay. Maybe that's how everyone does it. Caleb reached out slowly, and this time when his hand found hers across the space between them, she laced her fingers through his. You're a good listener, he said quietly. You're a good talker when you decide to talk. Don't make a habit of it. Too late. You opened up once. I'm going to keep pushing. She felt rather than saw him smile. Figured you might. They lay there in the darkness, hands joined across the middle of the bed. It wasn't much, but it felt like progress. The next week brought unexpected visitors. Eliza was hanging laundry when she saw 2 horses approaching. This time she recognized one of the riders, Sarah Mitchell, the woman from the general store. The other was a younger woman Eliza didn't know. Hello, Sarah called out as they dismounted. Hope you don't mind us dropping by. Eliza wiped her hands on her apron, suddenly aware of how she must look. Hair escaping from its braid, face flushed from work. Of course not. Can I offer you some water? Coffee? Water would be lovely. Sarah smiled warmly. This is my sister-in-law, Emma. She just moved to town last month. Emma was probably 20, with a sweet face and nervous hands that kept twisting her skirt. Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Vance. They settled on the porch, and Eliza brought out water and the last of the cookies she'd baked 2 days ago. She felt awkward, unsure what to say. She'd never been good at making friends, and these women were being kind when they had no reason to be. Your garden's coming in beautifully, Sarah said, nodding toward the neat rows of green. Mine's a disaster. The rabbits keep getting in. You need better fencing, Eliza said, then worried she sounded like she was lecturing. I mean, if you want, I could show you how we fixed ours. It wasn't expensive. I'd appreciate that. Sarah seemed genuine. Honestly, I'm not much of a gardener. I can cook what someone else grows, but growing it myself is another story. They talked about gardens and cooking and the weather, safe topics, easy topics. But underneath, Eliza could sense something else. These women hadn't just come to chat. Finally, Sarah set down her cup and said, Eliza, I wanted to apologize. For the wedding day. For standing there and not saying anything while everyone laughed. It was cruel, and I should have spoken up. You don't need to apologize. I do. We all do. The whole town. Sarah looked uncomfortable but determined. What we did to you that day, What we let happen, it was wrong. And I've been carrying that around for months now, feeling ashamed. Why tell me now? Because I saw you in town with your husband, saw how you stood up to Thomas Whitmore, and I realized you were braver than any of us. You faced down the whole town and you didn't break. Sarah's eyes were earnest. I wanted you to know that some of us are sorry. Some of us wish we'd been better. Emma nodded vigorously. I wasn't there that day, but I heard about it, and I think you're amazing for surviving it. Eliza didn't know what to say. She'd expected to live the rest of her life as the town outcast, the woman everyone whispered about. She hadn't expected apologies, hadn't expected anyone to see her as anything other than the object of that day's entertainment. Thank you, she finally managed. That means more than you know. There's something else, Sarah said. Some of us women have been talking about starting a quilting circle, getting together once a month, working on projects, just having time together. She paused. We'd like you to join us, if you want to. Eliza stared at her. You want me to join your quilting circle? Yes. We meet at different houses, rotate around. Next month it's at my place, the third Thursday. Sarah's smile was warm. It's not much, but it's something, a way to know each other better. I don't know if I'd be good company. You're already better company than half the women who'll be there, Emma said with surprising firmness. Mrs. Henderson talks about her cats for hours, and Mrs. Morrison only comes to gossip about everyone else. At least you're honest. Despite herself, Eliza laughed. It felt strange, laughing with these women on her porch like they were friends, like she was someone who could have friends. Okay, she heard herself say. I'll come. To the quilting circle. Sarah's face lit up. Wonderful. I'll send word about the details. They stayed another hour, talking about everything and nothing. When they finally left, Eliza stood on the porch and watched them ride away, feeling like the world had tilted slightly on its axis. Caleb found her there when he came in from working. Who was that? He asked. Sarah Mitchell, and her sister-in-law. Eliza turned to look at him. They came to apologize for the wedding day and to invite me to a quilting circle. Caleb raised his eyebrows. A quilting circle? I know, I was surprised too. You going to go? I said I would. Was that stupid? Why would it be stupid? Because they might just be doing it out of pity, or guilt, or because they feel sorry for me. Caleb climbed the porch steps and leaned against the railing beside her. Or maybe they genuinely want to know you. Maybe they realize they misjudged you. People don't change their minds that easily. Some do, especially when they see they were wrong. He studied her face. You should go. Give them a chance. Give yourself a chance. What if it's awful? What if I don't fit in? Then you leave and you don't go back. But at least you tried. He bumped her shoulder with his. You told me you wanted to be braver. Well, here's your chance. Eliza leaned into him, taking comfort from his solid presence. When did you get so wise? I'm not wise. I'm just practical. Same thing sometimes. They stood there watching the sun sink lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Eliza felt something unfamiliar settling over her, something that might have been contentment. She had a home, a husband who saw her as more than a burden, women who wanted to be her friends, or at least were willing to try. It wasn't the life she'd imagined for herself. It was better. That night, when they went to bed, Eliza didn't stay on her side. She moved closer to Caleb, closing some of that careful distance they'd been maintaining. His arm came around her, tucking her against his side, and she rested her head on his chest and listened to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. This okay? He asked quietly. Yeah, Eliza said. This is okay. She fell asleep feeling safe, feeling wanted, feeling like maybe, just maybe, she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The weeks that followed brought a rhythm to their lives that felt almost normal. Eliza went to the quilting circle and was surprised to find she didn't hate it. The women were kind, if a bit cautious at first, and she discovered she had opinions about fabric patterns and stitching techniques that people actually wanted to hear. Sarah became something close to a friend, stopping by the ranch occasionally with extra vegetables from her garden, or a loaf of bread she'd made too much of. Caleb worked the ranch, and Eliza worked beside him more often than not. She learned how to doctor a sick calf, how to mend tack, how to read the weather by the way the horses acted. Her hands grew more calloused, her arms stronger. She stopped flinching when she caught sight of herself in the mirror, stopped automatically cataloging everything that was wrong with her face. At night, they slept tangled together, the space between them finally conquered. Caleb kissed her in the mornings before he went out to work, and in the evenings when he came back in. They made love carefully at first, both of them nervous and uncertain, but gradually that carefulness gave way to something more honest, more real. It wasn't perfect. They still fought sometimes. Caleb would get moody and withdraw into himself, and Eliza would push too hard trying to get him to talk. She'd get overwhelmed and snap at him over nothing, and he'd go cold and distant until she apologized. But they were learning each other's patterns, learning how to fight without destroying what they'd built. 3.5 months into the marriage, they went to town together for supplies. It was supposed to be quick, in and out, nothing complicated. But as they were loading the wagon, Marcus Boone appeared. Eliza's father looked older than she remembered, grayer. The lines around his mouth had deepened. He stopped a few feet away, his hat in his hands, looking uncertain. "Eliza," he said. "Father." Caleb moved closer to her, not touching, but present, a silent reminder that she wasn't alone. Marcus glanced at Caleb, then back to Eliza. "I wanted to talk to you, if you have a minute." "I'm busy." "Please, just a minute." Eliza looked at Caleb. He raised an eyebrow. "Your choice." She sighed. "Fine. 1 minute." Marcus gestured toward the alley beside the general store. More private. Eliza followed him, aware of Caleb watching from the wagon, ready to intervene if needed. Her father turned to face her, working the brim of his hat between his hands. "You look good. Healthy." "I'm fine." "Catherine told me about her visit. What happened?" "Did she tell you what she said, or just her version of it?" Marcus winced. "She told me enough, and I wanted to say—" He stopped, searching for words. "I wanted to say, I'm sorry. For all of it. For the wedding. For the way we treated you. For making you feel like you weren't wanted." Eliza crossed her arms. "Little late for that. I know, but I need to say it anyway." He met her eyes. "I failed you, Eliza. As a father. I should have protected you, should have made you feel valued. Instead, I treated you like a problem to solve, and I'm sorry." The apology hit harder than Eliza expected. She'd imagined this conversation 100 times, imagined herself cold and unmoved, throwing his words back in his face. But standing here looking at her father's weathered face, all she felt was tired. "Why now?" she asked. "Why apologize now, months later?" "Because I've been watching you, seeing how you've changed. You come to town and you hold your head up. You speak your mind. You're not the scared girl who stood at that altar anymore." He paused. "And I realized that you did that despite me, not because of me. You became strong on your own, and I had nothing to do with it." "You're right. You didn't." "I know. And I'm proud of you anyway, even though I don't have a right to be." Eliza felt something crack in her chest. You can't just apologize and expect everything to be fine. You can't erase 24 years of disappointment with a few words. "I know that too. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just asking you to know that I see what I did, that I regret it, and that if you ever want to, I don't know, have a father in your life, I'd like to try to be one." "I don't know if I can do that," Eliza said honestly. "I don't know if I can trust you not to hurt me again." "That's fair." Marcus put his hat back on. "But the offer stands. Whenever you're ready. If you're ever ready." He started to walk away, then stopped. "That husband of yours. He's a good man, fierce about protecting you. I respect that. He is a good man, better than I deserved." "You deserved better than what you got from me," Marcus said quietly. "Don't ever think otherwise." Then he was gone, disappearing into the crowd on the street. Eliza stood in the alley, trying to process what had just happened. She didn't know what to feel. Anger? Relief? Some complicated mixture of both? Caleb appeared at the mouth of the alley. "You all right?" "I don't know." He apologized. "I heard." "Were you listening?" "I was making sure you were safe. There's a difference." Eliza managed a small smile. "He wants to try to be a father." "What do you want?" "I don't know that either." She moved toward him, and he pulled her into his arms. "Is it stupid to want that?" After everything? It's not stupid. It's human. Caleb pressed a kiss to the top of her head. But you don't have to decide anything right now. Take your time. Figure out what you need. What would you do? I'd probably tell him to go to hell, but I'm not good at forgiveness. You might be better at it than me. I don't feel very good at it. You're better than you think. He pulled back to look at her face. You ready to head home? Yeah, let's go home. They loaded the last of the supplies and were about to leave when Thomas Whitmore appeared again. This time he wasn't alone. He had 3 other men with him, all young, all looking like they'd been drinking despite it being barely past noon. Well, well, Thomas said, his voice carrying across the street. If it isn't the happy couple. Caleb went very still beside her. Eliza recognized that stillness. It was the same way he looked right before a storm, contained and dangerous. Keep walking, Caleb said quietly to her. But Thomas stepped into their path. What's the hurry? Can't stop to chat with old friends. We're not friends, Eliza said. No? I thought we were close, almost married after all. Thomas grinned at his companions. Of course, that was before I came to my senses. One of the other men laughed. Heard you took her on anyway, Vance. That true? You actually went through with it? Move, Caleb said. His voice was flat, empty of emotion. Eliza had learned that was when he was most dangerous. Just making conversation. Thomas swayed slightly. He was definitely drunk. Just curious what it's like. Being married to the town charity case. Must be rough, huh? Waking up to that face every morning. Last warning, Caleb said. Or what? You gonna shoot me? Over her? Thomas laughed. She ain't worth it, Vance. Whatever you're getting out of this arrangement, it ain't worth defending her honor. She doesn't have any. Caleb moved so fast, Eliza barely saw it. 1 second he was standing beside her, the next his fist connected with Thomas's jaw with a sound like a branch cracking. Thomas went down hard, landing in the dirt. The other 3 men rushed forward, but Caleb was ready. He caught the first one with an elbow to the face, sent the second stumbling back with a knee to the gut. The third hesitated, saw what had happened to his friends, and decided to stay put. People were gathering now, drawn by the commotion. Eliza saw Sheriff McKenna pushing through the crowd, his face thunderous. What in the hell is going on here? Dutch demanded. Caleb was breathing hard, but his voice was steady. These men insulted my wife. I responded. Thomas was climbing to his feet, blood running from his split lip. He attacked me. You saw it. I saw you blocking their path, someone called out. Eliza recognized the voice. It was Sarah Mitchell. I saw you being aggressive. Seemed like self-defense to me. Several other people murmured agreement. Eliza was shocked to realize they were taking Caleb's side, taking her side. Dutch looked between them, clearly trying to decide what to do. Thomas, you been drinking? What's that got to do with anything? Answer the question. Thomas wiped blood from his mouth. Maybe a little. So what? That give him the right to hit me? No, but it means you're drunk and disorderly in the middle of town, starting fights with men who are just trying to go about their business. Dutch turned to Caleb. You done? Or are you planning on hitting anyone else today? I'm done. Soon as these men get out of our way. Dutch nodded. Thomas, you and your friends get out of here. Sleep it off. And if I catch you harassing the Vances again, we're going to have a different kind of conversation. You understand? Thomas looked like he wanted to argue, but one look at Dutch's face changed his mind. He and his friends slunk off, muttering under their breaths. The crowd began to disperse. Dutch looked at Caleb with something that might have been respect. You've got a good right hook, he said. Had practice. I bet. Dutch glanced at Eliza. Ma'am, sorry you had to deal with that. Thank you, Sheriff, for being fair about it. Dutch tipped his hat and walked away. Eliza turned to Caleb, who was flexing his hand, checking for damage. You hit him, she said. Yes. You could have gotten arrested. Worth it. Caleb. He turned to face her, and the look in his eyes stopped her words. Nobody talks about you like that. Not him. Not anyone. I don't care who they are or what they think they have a right to say. They don't get to hurt you. It was just words. Words matter, and you matter. More than he does, more than any of them do. His hand came up to cup her face, gentle, despite the violence he'd just enacted. You understand that? You matter to me. Eliza felt tears prick her eyes. You can't fight everyone who says something mean about me. There are too many of them. Watch me try? Despite everything, she laughed. It came out watery and choked, but it was real. You're insane. Probably. You married me anyway. I did. She leaned into his touch. Thank you for defending me. Always. They climbed onto the wagon and rode out of town. Eliza could feel people watching, but for the first time she didn't care. Let them watch. Let them whisper. She had something they couldn't touch, someone who saw her as worth defending. That night, lying in bed, Eliza traced the bruises forming on Caleb's knuckles. Does it hurt? She asked. I've had worse. That's not an answer. It's fine. I've hit harder things than Thomas Whitmore's face. Eliza kissed his knuckles gently. My fierce protector. Is that what I am? Among other things. She looked up at him. I've been thinking about what my father said, about wanting to try. And? I think maybe I want to let him. Not right away, not until I'm ready, but eventually. Maybe. Caleb nodded. That's good. Family's important, even when it's complicated. Did you have family? Before? Parents died when I was young. Raised by my uncle. He was a lawman, too. That's where I got it from. He died about 10 years back. Caleb was quiet for a moment. Sarah's family didn't want anything to do with me after she passed. Thought I could have saved her somehow. Done more. They weren't wrong. You couldn't have cured a fever, Caleb. Maybe not. But I could have been there more. Could have paid attention instead of being so focused on the job. His voice went rough. I was chasing an outlaw when she got sick. Didn't even know she was dying until I got back and it was too late. By then, she'd been in the ground 3 days. Eliza's heart clenched. Oh, Caleb, I should have been there. Should have been with her at the end. Instead, she died alone, probably calling for me, and I wasn't there. He stared at the ceiling. That's what I can't forgive myself for. Not that I couldn't save her, but that I chose wrong, chose the job over her, and by the time I realized my mistake, there was no way to fix it. Is that why you quit? Part of it. Couldn't see the point of catching bad men if I couldn't even protect the person I loved most. Seemed like all I was good at was violence and failure. Eliza shifted, moving to rest her head on his chest. You're good at more than that. You're good at building things, at fixing things, at making me feel like I'm worth something. You are worth something. I'm starting to believe that, because of you. His arm tightened around her. I don't want to let you down the way I let Sarah down. You won't. You don't know that. I know you're here. I know you show up every day. I know you chose me, and you keep choosing me. She pressed a kiss to his chest, right over his heart. That's enough, Caleb. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be here. They lay in silence for a while. Then Caleb said, I'm falling in love with you. Eliza's breath caught. What? I'm falling in love with you. Might already be there. Hard to tell. It's been so long since I felt it. He paused. Thought you should know. Eliza pushed herself up to look at his face. In the moonlight, his expression was open, vulnerable in a way she'd never seen before. You don't have to say it back, he continued. I'm not expecting that. I just wanted you to know, wanted to be honest. I think I'm falling in love with you too, Eliza whispered. I'm scared to death of it, but I think I am. Yeah? Yeah. She kissed him, soft and slow. You're not what I expected. This whole thing isn't what I expected. But it's better. You're better. I'm really not. You are to me. They made love then, slow and tender, speaking with their bodies what they were still learning to say with words. Afterward, Eliza lay wrapped in Caleb's arms and felt something she'd never felt before, utterly safe, utterly wanted, utterly home. The next few weeks passed in a haze of contentment. Eliza threw herself into the ranch work with renewed energy. The garden was producing now, and she spent hours preserving vegetables for winter. The chickens were laying well. Caleb bought 2 more cows, and suddenly they had the beginnings of an actual herd. They talked about the future for the first time, about expanding the ranch, maybe hiring help someday, about children, tentatively, both of them dancing around the subject like it might break if they looked at it too directly. Would you want them? Eliza asked one evening, They were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and purple. Children? Yes. Caleb was quiet for a moment. I think so. Someday, if it happens. He glanced at her. Would you? I used to think no one would ever want children with me, that I'd never have that chance. Eliza leaned into him. But now, yeah, I think I would. If we're ready, if we can give them a good life. We'd have to work on not passing down our damage, Caleb said dryly. We'd do our best. That's all anyone can do. Sarah and I tried, for years. It never happened. His voice was careful. Might not happen with us either. And if it doesn't, that's all right too. We'll still have each other. We'll still have this. Caleb pulled her closer. When did you get so wise? I learned from someone. They sat there as the light faded, comfortable in the silence, comfortable with each other. Eliza thought about how far she'd come from that day in the town square. How much had changed. How much she'd changed. She wasn't the same woman who'd stood at that altar, defeated before the ceremony even started. She was stronger now, braver. She'd learned to stand up for herself, to believe she deserved good things, to accept love when it was offered instead of assuming it was a trick or a lie. And Caleb wasn't the same man who drifted into town looking for supplies and ended up with a wife. He smiled more now, laughed occasionally. The nightmares still came, but less frequently. The shadows in his eyes were lighter. They were healing each other, slowly, imperfectly, but genuinely. 2 days later, everything changed. Eliza was in the kitchen making bread when she heard shouting from outside. She ran to the window and saw Caleb sprinting toward the barn, where smoke was billowing from the hayloft. Fire. She didn't think. She grabbed buckets and ran. The well was between the house and the barn, and she started drawing water as fast as she could, her hands shaking, her mind racing. Fire on a ranch was a death sentence. It could spread to the house, kill the animals, destroy everything they'd built. Caleb was already inside the barn, leading the horses out. The cows were panicking, bellowing, and trying to break through the fence. Eliza ran bucket after bucket of water, throwing it at the flames, but it felt useless. The fire was too big, spreading too fast. Get back, Caleb yelled. Eliza, get away from it. We can stop it. It's too late. Just get the animals clear. She helped him drive the animals away from the barn, toward the far pasture. The chickens scattered in every direction, squawking in panic. The smoke was thick now, burning her lungs, making her eyes water. With a groan that sounded almost alive, part of the barn roof collapsed. Flames shot up into the sky, visible for miles. Caleb grabbed her arm and pulled her back. It's gone! We can't save it! They stood there helplessly and watched the barn burn. All the work Caleb had put into repairing it, all the supplies they'd stored inside, the winter hay for the animals. Gone. It took hours for the fire to burn itself out. By the time it was done, there was nothing left but charred beams and ash. The smell of smoke hung over everything. They spent the rest of the day securing the animals as best they could, moving them to temporary shelter, taking stock of what was lost. It was bad. Worse than bad. Without the barn, they had nowhere to store feed or equipment. Winter was coming, and they'd just lost their primary shelter for the livestock. That night, they sat at the table and tried to figure out what to do. We can rebuild, Eliza said, but even she could hear the doubt in her voice. With what money? We spent everything we had on supplies and livestock. We don't have enough to rebuild before winter hits. Caleb's face was grim. We might have to sell the herd, maybe even the land. No, we can't. This is our home. I know, but I don't see another option. Eliza felt panic rising in her chest. They couldn't lose this. Not now. Not after everything they'd been through, everything they'd built together. There has to be a way, she said. We could borrow money, or… From who? Your father? The words hit like a slap. Eliza stared at him. You want me to ask my father for money? I don't want you to do anything. I'm just saying we don't have a lot of options. I'm not going to him for help. I'm not going to prove everyone right that I can't make it on my own. This isn't about pride, Eliza. Yes, it is. It's exactly about pride. You think I'm going to crawl back to town and beg for help from people who laughed at me, who mocked me? She stood up, pacing. We'll find another way. What other way? Magic money going to fall from the sky? I don't know, but I'll figure something out. Caleb stood too. You can't fix everything by sheer stubbornness. Watch me try. They glared at each other across the table. Then Caleb's shoulders sagged. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I'm not trying to fight with you, I'm just scared. The admission deflated Eliza's anger. Me too. I thought I could make this work, thought I could build something stable. But maybe I was kidding myself. Maybe I'm not meant for this kind of life. Don't say that. Why not? It's true. Everything I touch turns to ash eventually. Sarah, the ranch. Maybe you're next. Stop it. Eliza moved around the table to face him. This isn't your fault. Fires happen. It's not some curse or punishment. Feels like it. Well, it's not. It's just bad luck, and we're going to get through it. She grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. We're going to figure this out. Together. Like everything else. Caleb closed his eyes. I don't know how. Then we'll start small. One step at a time. First step. We don't give up. And the second step? I'll let you know when I figure it out. Despite everything, Caleb huffed out something that might have been a laugh. You're something else. So are you. Now come on. We need sleep. Tomorrow we start solving problems. They went to bed, but neither of them slept much. Eliza lay awake listening to Caleb's breathing, trying to think of solutions, and coming up empty. They had nothing, no savings, no way to rebuild, no plan. Unless. The thought came to her in the early hours of the morning, just as the sky was starting to lighten. It was a terrible idea, but it might be their only option. She'd have to go back to town, not to beg, but to fight. When Eliza told Caleb her plan over breakfast, he stared at her like she'd suggested they burn down the house too. Absolutely not, he said. It's the only way. It's not the only way. It's the most dangerous way. Eliza set down her coffee cup. The Harvest Festival is in 3 days. The whole town will be there. There's always a dance, right? Music and food and everyone celebrating. So we go. We show up. And we show them that we're not broken, that we're still standing. She leaned forward. And then we ask for help, not charity. A loan. From the community fund. The town kept a community fund for emergencies, fires, floods, injuries that left families unable to work. Eliza had heard about it her whole life, but never thought she'd need it. Now it might be their only chance. They'll never give it to us, Caleb said. Half the town still thinks our marriage is a joke. Then we change their minds. We show them we're serious, that we're building something worth saving. By going to a dance? Eliza, that's the same place where they humiliated me, I know. She met his eyes. That's exactly why we have to go back. I have to face them. Show them I'm not afraid anymore. Show them I'm not the same person I was. Caleb shook his head. You don't have anything to prove to those people. Maybe not, but I have something to prove to myself. She reached across the table and took his hand. I spent my whole life being afraid, hiding, making myself small so I wouldn't get hurt. And I'm done with that. I'm done letting fear run my life. This isn't about fear. This is about protecting yourself from people who've already shown they'll hurt you. They can only hurt me if I let them, and I'm not going to let them anymore. Eliza squeezed his hand. Please, I need to do this. I need to walk back into that town and stand there with my head up. I need to face them and ask for what we need without apologizing for existing. Caleb studied her face for a long moment. Then he sighed. You're sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything. Then we'll do it. But I'm staying right beside you the whole time. I wouldn't have it any other way. The next 3 days were spent preparing. Eliza mended their best clothes, pressed Caleb's shirt, fixed the hem on her only decent dress. They practiced what they'd say, how they'd present their case. Caleb wanted to do all the talking, but Eliza insisted it had to be her. Her voice, her words. They need to see me as a person, she explained. Not just your wife, not just the woman they laughed at. Me. Eliza. Someone who deserves to be heard. The day of the festival dawned clear and bright. Eliza woke early, her stomach in knots. She'd barely slept, running through scenarios in her head. What if they laughed? What if they said no? What if this whole thing backfired and made everything worse? Hey, Caleb's voice was soft in the dim morning light. You're thinking too loud. Sorry. Don't be sorry, just talk to me. What are you afraid of? Eliza rolled over to face him. Everything. Failing, looking stupid, proving my mother right that I'll never be enough. You're already enough. You know that, right? Some days. Other days I feel like that girl standing at the altar all over again, waiting for someone to tell her she's worthless. Caleb pulled her close. You're not worthless. You're brave. Braver than anyone I've ever known. You're walking straight into the place that hurt you most, and you're doing it with your head up. That's not weakness. That's strength. I don't feel strong. You don't have to feel it to be it. He kissed her forehead. I'll be right there. Every step. You start to falter, you look at me. I'll remind you who you are. Who am I? You're Eliza Vance. You're stubborn and smart, and you work harder than 3 men combined. You're the woman who turned a failing ranch into something worth fighting for. You're the woman I love. He paused. And you're a hell of a lot stronger than anyone gives you credit for, including yourself. Eliza felt tears sting her eyes. I love you too. I don't think I've said that enough. You say it every day, just not always with words. They got ready slowly, neither of them in a hurry to start what was coming. Eliza put on her dress, a simple brown cotton that she'd let out slightly in the waist because she'd gained weight since the wedding. Good weight, from regular meals and hard work. She'd stopped looking gaunt, stopped looking haunted. She braided her hair and pinned it up. No fancy styling, nothing to try to make herself something she wasn't. Just neat, presentable, honest. Caleb wore his dark pants and white shirt, the vest that made his shoulders look broader. He strapped on his gun belt and caught her looking. Just in case, he said, you're not going to shoot anyone at a town festival. Probably not. But I like to be prepared. They rode to town in the wagon, the morning sun warm on their backs. As they got closer, Eliza could hear music drifting across the prairie. Fiddles and guitars, someone singing, the sound of people laughing, children shouting, normal sounds, happy sounds. She felt sick. We can turn around, Caleb said quietly. No, we're doing this. The town square had been transformed. Banners hung between buildings, tables were laden with food, and a makeshift dance floor had been set up in the center. People milled around everywhere, dressed in their best clothes, celebrating the harvest. As Eliza and Caleb climbed down from the wagon, heads turned. Conversation stuttered and stopped. The music kept playing, but people were staring now, watching to see what would happen. Sarah Mitchell appeared at Eliza's elbow almost immediately. You came. I'm so glad. Sarah. Eliza managed a smile. How are you? Better now that you're here. Come on, let me introduce you to some people. Sarah led them through the crowd, making introductions. Some people were friendly, if cautious. Others were cold, turning away after perfunctory greetings. Thomas Whitmore was there with a black eye that had faded to yellow-green. He saw Caleb and quickly found somewhere else to be. Eliza's parents were near the food tables. Her mother saw her and went pale. Her father started to move toward them, but Catherine grabbed his arm and held him back. Are they always like that? Sarah asked, following Eliza's gaze. Pretty much. My mother and I aren't exactly on speaking terms. That's their loss. Sarah squeezed Eliza's hand. You look wonderful, by the way. Happy. Different than before. I am different. Good different. The music shifted to something slower, and couples moved onto the dance floor. Eliza watched them, remembering every dance she'd sat out, every time she'd stood on the sidelines while other girls twirled and laughed. Dance with me, Caleb said suddenly. Eliza turned to him. What? Dance with me. Here. Now. In front of everyone. Caleb, trust me. He held out his hand. Do you trust me? Eliza looked at his hand, then at his face, at the determination in his eyes, the quiet strength. She thought about everything they'd been through, everything they'd survived together. Yes, she said. I trust you. She took his hand and let him lead her onto the dance floor. People moved aside, creating space, watching. The music was a simple waltz, something Eliza had heard 100 times but never danced to. Caleb's hand was warm on her waist, his other hand holding hers. Just follow my lead, he murmured. And don't look at them. Look at me. They started to move. Eliza stumbled at first, uncertain, but Caleb held her steady. One step, then another. The world narrowed to just the two of them, moving together in time with the music. You're doing great, Caleb said softly. I can't believe we're doing this. I can. You were made for this, for standing up and being seen. Eliza glanced around despite his instructions. People were watching, but the expressions had changed. Some looked surprised, some looked thoughtful, and some, like Sarah Mitchell, were smiling. The music swelled, and Caleb spun her carefully, pulling her back in close. Still with me? Always. When the song ended, there was a moment of silence. Then, slowly, applause began. Not from everyone. Her mother still looked horrified, and Thomas had disappeared completely, but from enough people that it mattered. Sarah was clapping enthusiastically. Old Mr. Peterson from the general store was nodding approval. Even Sheriff McKenna had a slight smile on his weathered face. As they walked off the dance floor, Marcus Boone stepped forward. Eliza tensed, but her father just looked at them both and said, "That took courage, both of you." "Thank you," Eliza managed. "I mean it, and I'm proud of you, for what it's worth." It was worth something, not everything, but something. Eliza nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. The festival continued around them. People gradually stopped staring and went back to their own conversations, their own dances. Caleb got Eliza a plate of food, and they found a relatively quiet spot to sit. "You ready for the hard part?" he asked. Eliza took a breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." They found Sheriff McKenna talking with the mayor, Harold Sutton, and the head of the town council, Margaret Drummond. These were the people who controlled the community fund. Sheriff, Mayor Sutton, Mrs. Drummond. Eliza kept her voice steady. "Could we have a moment of your time?" The three exchanged glances. "Of course, Mrs. Vance," the mayor said. "What can we do for you?" "Our barn burned down 3 days ago," Eliza said. "We lost most of our winter supplies, our equipment, our feed storage. We're trying to rebuild, but we don't have the funds to do it before winter sets in." "I heard about the fire," Mrs. Drummond said. "Terrible business. Do they know what started it?" "Lightning strike, most likely," Caleb said. "We'd had dry weather. It went up fast." "We're here to request a loan from the community fund," Eliza continued. "We're not asking for charity. We'll pay back every cent with interest. We just need help getting through this winter, getting the barn rebuilt so we can keep the ranch running." The mayor looked uncomfortable. "Mrs. Vance, the community fund is for emergencies, yes, but it's also limited. We have to be careful about who we lend to." "This is an emergency," Eliza said, "and we're part of this community. We pay our debts. We work hard. We're not asking for a handout. We're asking for a chance." "The thing is," Mrs. Drummond said carefully, "some people might question whether your ranch is viable, long-term. No offense meant, but you've only been out there a few months. It's a lot of work for 2 people." "We know it's a lot of work," Caleb said. "We're doing it anyway." "But what happens if you can't make it? If the ranch fails despite the loan? Then the community is out that money with nothing to show for it." Eliza felt anger rising in her chest. "You mean what happens when we fail, not if. You've already decided we're going to fail." Mrs. Drummond had the grace to look embarrassed. "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." Eliza looked around at the gathered crowd. More people were listening now, drawn by the raised voices. "Good. Let them hear this. My whole life, people in this town have expected me to fail, expected me to be nothing, to amount to nothing. And you know what? I proved them wrong. I survived. I built something, and I'm still standing." She turned back to the council members. "That ranch is our home. It's not much, but it's ours. We've put everything we have into it. And yes, we've only been there a few months, but in that time we've repaired the house, built up the herd, planted a garden that's feeding us. We're making it work. And we'll keep making it work if you give us a chance." "Mrs. Vance," the mayor started. "I'm not finished." Eliza's voice rang clear across the square. "You want to know if we're viable? If we're worth the risk? Then look at us. Really look. We're not quitters, we're fighters, and we're asking, not begging, asking for the same chance you'd give anyone else in this town who had a disaster strike their home." The silence that followed was thick. Then a voice called out from the crowd. "She's right." Eliza turned to see who'd spoken. It was James Tucker, the widower with 3 children. "We got help from that fund 2 years ago when my barn flooded. Lost everything. The loan saved us. Paid it back in 18 months. He stepped forward. If they're willing to work as hard as they say, they deserve the same shot I got. I agree, Sarah Mitchell said loudly. They've been nothing but good neighbors since they started that ranch. Honest, hardworking people. That's exactly who the fund is meant to help. More voices joined in. Not everyone. Eliza could see her mother's face, tight with disapproval, and plenty of others looked skeptical. But enough. Enough to matter. Sheriff McKenna cleared his throat. Mayor, might I have a word? The 3 council members huddled together, speaking in low voices. Eliza stood there, Caleb's hand finding hers and squeezing tight. She'd said her piece. There was nothing more she could do. Finally, the mayor turned back to them. We'll need to see a full accounting of your losses and a plan for how you'll use the funds. And we'll need collateral, the land deed most likely. Does that mean, Eliza started, it means we're willing to consider the loan, pending the paperwork and council approval. Mayor Sutton's expression softened slightly. You make a compelling case, Mrs. Vance, and you're right. Everyone deserves a fair chance. Relief flooded through Eliza so intensely she felt lightheaded. Thank you. Thank you so much. Don't thank us yet. You've got a lot of work ahead of you. We're not afraid of work, Caleb said. As the council members moved away to discuss details, people came up to offer congratulations or support. Sarah hugged Eliza tightly. You were amazing. I've never seen anyone stand up like that. I was terrified. You didn't show it. You were fierce. Marcus Boone approached cautiously. Eliza, I'm proud of you. The way you spoke, the way you fought for what you needed. Thank you, Father. I mean it. You've become someone I barely recognize, someone stronger than I gave you credit for. He paused. If there's anything I can do to help with the rebuild, we'll manage, Eliza said. Then, softer, but thank you for offering. He nodded and walked away. Eliza watched him go, feeling a complicated mix of emotions. They weren't reconciled, not really. But maybe someday they could be. Maybe forgiveness was something you built slowly, like a house or a marriage. One board at a time. Catherine Boone didn't approach. She stood at the edge of the crowd, watching, her expression unreadable. Eliza met her mother's eyes across the distance and saw something there. Maybe regret, maybe resentment, maybe just confusion. Then Catherine turned away, disappearing into the crowd. Some bridges couldn't be rebuilt. And that was all right. Eliza had learned she didn't need her mother's approval to know her own worth. The music started up again, and Caleb pulled Eliza back onto the dance floor. This time she didn't hesitate, didn't stumble. She let him lead her through the steps, let herself be seen, let herself be happy. You did it, Caleb murmured as they moved. You walked in here and you faced them down and you won. We did it, Eliza corrected. Together. Together, he agreed. They danced until the sun started to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Other couples joined them, and soon the floor was crowded with people celebrating the harvest, celebrating the community, celebrating life. When they finally left, the stars were coming out overhead. They rode home in comfortable silence, Eliza tucked against Caleb's side. What are you thinking about? He asked. Everything, nothing, how different things are from 4 months ago. She tilted her head to look at him. If you could go back to that day in the town square, knowing everything that would happen after, would you still do it? Would you still step forward? Caleb didn't hesitate. Yes. Every time. You? Yes, Eliza said. Even the hard parts, even the scary parts, because it led here, to this, to us. No regrets? Not a single one. The ranch appeared over the rise, small and weathered and home. The burned remnants of the barn were a dark shadow against the starlit sky, a reminder of what they'd lost, but also a reminder of what they'd survived. They'd rebuild. With the loan, with their own labor, with help from neighbors who were slowly becoming friends. It would take time. It would be hard. But they'd do it together. That night, lying in bed, Eliza traced patterns on Caleb's chest and thought about strength. Real strength, the kind that came from surviving things that should have broken you. The kind that came from choosing to stand when it would be easier to fall. She'd spent so much of her life believing she was weak, believing the lies people told about her, the judgments they made based on nothing but her face. But she wasn't weak. She never had been. She'd endured years of cruelty and kept going. She'd stood at that altar and faced humiliation and survived it. She'd built a life out of nothing but hard work and stubbornness. And she'd learned to love. Not the careful, guarded kind of love that protected itself from hurt, but the messy, terrifying kind that risked everything. The kind that said yes even when it was scary. The kind that chose someone every single day, even when it was hard. Caleb? I think I finally understand what you saw in me, that day in the square. Yeah, what's that? You saw someone who refused to break. Someone who took everything the world threw at her and kept standing. She shifted to look at his face in the darkness. And you were right. I didn't break then, and I'm not going to break now. Whatever comes, we'll handle it. Caleb's hand came up to cup her face. Damn right we will. He kissed her, slow and deep, and Eliza kissed him back with all the love and gratitude and fierce determination she felt. They made love with the windows open, the cool night air washing over them, the stars bright overhead. Afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, Eliza thought about the future, about children who might come someday, who they'd raise to be strong and kind and unafraid, about the ranch they'd build into something prosperous, about growing old together, weathering storms and celebrating victories. But mostly she thought about the present, about this moment, right here, with this man who'd chosen her when no one else would, who'd seen worth in her when she couldn't see it in herself, who'd given her not just a home, but a life. She'd started this journey broken and afraid, convinced she was worthless, and now she was whole. Not perfect. She'd never be perfect, and neither would Caleb, but whole, complete. Enough. More than enough. The next morning, they woke early and started planning the rebuild. Caleb sketched out designs for a new barn, while Eliza made lists of materials they'd need. They argued good-naturedly about where to put the doors and whether they needed a second loft. We're going to make this one better, Caleb said, studying his sketch. Stronger. Built to last. Like us, Eliza said. He looked up at her and smiled. Yeah, like us. 3 days later, the loan came through. The town council approved it unanimously, with the condition that the Vances submit quarterly reports on their progress and finances. It was more than they'd hoped for, enough not just to rebuild the barn but to expand it, to buy additional supplies for winter, to invest in improving the ranch. The day the money arrived, Eliza stood in the middle of what would be the new barn and looked around. The foundation had been laid, the frame would go up next week. It was happening. They were actually doing this. Sarah Mitchell and several other women from the quilting circle showed up that afternoon with food and offers to help however they could. James Tucker brought his oldest son to assist with the construction. Even Marcus Boone appeared, toolbox in hand, saying gruffly that he knew something about building barns and figured they could use an extra set of hands. Eliza worked alongside them all, sawing and hammering and hauling. Her hands blistered and her back ached, but she'd never felt more alive. This was hers. This was theirs. Built with their own hands, supported by a community that was learning to accept them. By the time winter came, the barn stood tall and solid, better than the original had ever been. The animals were sheltered and well fed. The house had been improved too. New shutters, a repaired roof, a second room that Caleb built on for reasons he wouldn't quite explain, but Eliza suspected had to do with those future children they'd talked about. Snow fell soft and quiet on Christmas Eve. Eliza and Caleb sat by the fire, warm and content, sipping coffee and watching the flames dance. You know what I realized today? Eliza said. What's that? I'm happy. Really, genuinely happy. I don't think I've ever been able to say that before. Caleb pulled her closer. Me either. Not for a long time, anyway. We did all right, didn't we? For two people who had no idea what they were doing. We did better than all right. We built something real. Eliza thought about that word. Real. Their marriage had started as a transaction, a rescue, a moment of desperate kindness, but it had become real. Through work and honesty and choosing each other every single day, they'd built something that mattered, something that would last. I love you, she said. I don't say it enough, but I do. I love you so much it scares me sometimes. I love you too. Caleb's voice was soft. You know what the best part is? What? I get to keep loving you, tomorrow, and the day after, and all the days after that, for the rest of our lives. That's a long time. Not long enough. They sat there as the fire burned low and the snow piled up outside, two people who'd found each other in the worst possible circumstances and turned it into the best possible life. Two people who'd been broken and had healed each other. Two people who'd learned that worth wasn't something bestowed by others. It was something you claimed for yourself. Eliza had walked down that aisle 4 months ago expecting nothing but humiliation and pain. Instead, she'd found a partner, a home, a future. She'd found herself. And standing in that town square with everyone watching, waiting for her to fail, she'd discovered the truth that had been there all along. She was strong enough. She always had been. She just needed someone to remind her of it until she could remember it on her own. The next morning, Eliza woke to find Caleb already up, standing at the window and looking out at the snow-covered ranch. She joined him, slipping her arm around his waist. "What are you thinking about?" she asked. "How lucky I am. How close I came to riding right past that town square without stopping." He turned to look at her. "What if I hadn't heard the noise? What if I'd been 5 minutes later?" "But you weren't. You were exactly when and where you needed to be." "So were you." They stood there watching the sun rise over their land, over the life they'd built from nothing but stubbornness and faith. The barn stood strong against the winter sky. The animals were content in their shelter. Smoke rose from the chimney of their little house. It wasn't much, maybe, not compared to grand estates or sprawling ranches, but it was theirs, earned through hard work and harder choices, built on honesty and respect and love that had grown slowly, carefully, into something unshakable. Later that day, they rode into town for supplies. People waved as they passed, called out greetings. Mrs. Drummond stopped them to ask about the barn construction. Sarah invited them to dinner the following week. Even Thomas Whitmore managed a grudging nod of acknowledgement. As they loaded the wagon, Sheriff McKenna approached. "Heard you made your first loan payment ahead of schedule." "We did," Caleb confirmed. "Business has been good." "Glad to hear it." Dutch's expression was approving. "You two have done well, better than most folks expected." "We had a lot to prove," Eliza said. "Maybe at first, but now?" He shook his head. "Now you're just part of the community. Same as anyone else. Same as anyone else." 6 months ago, those words would have felt like an insult. Now they felt like acceptance, like belonging. They rode home through the snow, Eliza's head on Caleb's shoulder, both of them quiet and content. The ranch appeared over the hill, and Eliza felt that same surge of pride and love she felt every time she saw it. Home. Not because of the land or the buildings, but because of what they represented. A choice to keep going when quitting would have been easier. A choice to believe in something better. A choice to love and be loved, despite all the reasons not to. That night, Eliza started a letter to her sisters. She hadn't spoken to them since before the wedding, hadn't even told them she'd gotten married. But now she felt ready to reach out, to share this new life she'd built. She wrote about the ranch, about Caleb, about the community that was slowly accepting her. She wrote about finding strength she didn't know she had, about learning to stand up for herself. She didn't know if they'd respond. But that was all right. She was writing it for herself as much as for them, a record of how far she'd come. Caleb read over her shoulder, his arms around her waist. "You gonna tell them about the dance?" "Maybe. If I can figure out how to describe it without sounding like I'm bragging." "Brag a little. You earned it." Eliza leaned back against him. "We earned it. All of this. Together." "Together," he agreed. The months turned into a year. The ranch prospered. The herd grew. They hired their first hand, a young man named Peter who'd lost his family to illness and needed work. The garden expanded. The house got bigger, room by room, as they could afford it. And Eliza changed. Not in her face, that stayed the same, plain and angular and scarred, but in how she carried herself. In the confidence that came from knowing she was valued. In the smile that came easier now, the laugh that rang out more freely. She stopped seeing herself through other people's eyes and started seeing herself through her own. And what she saw was someone who'd survived. Someone who'd built a life worth living. Someone who was loved, not despite who she was, but because of it. One evening, almost exactly a year after that first dance, they returned to town for another festival. This time, when they arrived, people greeted them warmly. Sarah rushed over with her children in tow. James Tucker invited them to sit with his family. Even Marcus Boone, who'd been slowly rebuilding his relationship with his daughter, came over to shake Caleb's hand and tell Eliza she looked well. Catherine Boone was there too, standing apart from the crowd as usual. For the first time in months, she approached Eliza. "You look happy," she said. No greeting, no preamble, just that observation. "I am," Eliza said simply. Catherine's face worked. "I was wrong. About you. About him. About everything." "Yes, you were." "I don't expect you to forgive me." "Good. Because I'm not there yet." Eliza met her mother's eyes. "Maybe someday, but not today." Catherine nodded slowly. "That's fair. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. What I did to you, and I'm sorry." She walked away before Eliza could respond. Eliza watched her go, feeling that familiar mix of anger and sadness, and something that might eventually become forgiveness. But not yet. Some wounds took longer to heal than others. Caleb appeared at her side. "You all right?" "Yeah, I am." She took his hand. "Dance with me?" "Always." They moved on to the dance floor together, and this time no one stared. They were just another couple among many, celebrating another harvest. Another year survived and thrived. The music swelled and Caleb spun her, and Eliza laughed, free and unguarded. This was her life now. Not the one she'd imagined, not the one anyone had expected, but hers. Built on her own terms, with her own hands, alongside someone who saw her truly and loved her anyway. As they danced under the stars, Eliza thought about that girl who'd stood at the altar 4 months ago, broken and defeated. She wished she could go back and tell her that it would be okay, that the humiliation and pain would lead somewhere better, that the stranger who stepped forward to save her would become the person she couldn't imagine living without. But maybe that girl wouldn't have believed it. Maybe she needed to live through it to understand, needed to walk through fire to discover she was fireproof. The song ended and another began. Caleb held her close, his breath warm against her ear. "What are you thinking about? How far we've come? How much has changed? Any regrets?" Eliza pulled back to look at his face, at the man who'd given her everything without knowing it. "Not a single one." "You?" "Only that I didn't find you sooner. You found me exactly when you were supposed to, when we were both ready." "Maybe you're right." They danced until their feet ached, until the music finally stopped and people started heading home. As they walked back to their wagon, hand in hand, Eliza looked up at the stars and thought about worth. She'd spent so much of her life believing her worth came from other people, from whether they found her pretty or useful or acceptable. But worth didn't come from outside. It came from within, from surviving, from choosing to stand up even when standing hurt, from building something meaningful with your own hands and refusing to let anyone tear it down. She was worthy because she existed, because she tried, because she loved and allowed herself to be loved in return. That was the lesson. That was what she'd learned from all of this, and she'd carry it with her for the rest of her life.